I'll just get a little political, not too much, because everyone wants to know what's going to happen over there in the Middle East. This has happened before. I'm not speaking on that today, but this has all happened before, and it will happen again until Messiah comes back. Someone asked me this morning, what is God doing with Israel? I don't know. I don't know exactly God's plans. I know He promises to give them a land, to protect the people. I know He promises to bless the land, to bless the people. I know God's promises. But I don't know what He's going to do in between. And I don't know what He's going to do with America as we take our stand or not for Israel. But I do know, and I'm a little disturbed, but I'm always disturbed, when I hear people talk on the news. Last week I heard the commentator was saying, what about all the poor children in Gaza? I feel bad for the poor children in Gaza. But the leadership take the children and put them right where the bombs are going to go. They do it on purpose. What other nation in the world, can you imagine this? What other nation in the world decides to focus in, hone in, because Israel is great. They could just focus on one building better than anyone, which they did. And they're going to destroy the building with the leadership. What other nation in the world says to the people in the building and the country, we're coming, get out? What kind of plan is this for Israel? But Israel warns them. Israel sometimes drops leaflets. We're going to bomb this area. They warn the enemy. And the amazing thing about the enemy, they put innocence in the place to show the world how much they're suffering. But what about the innocents in Israel? They're not warned. Just thousands and thousands of rockets. And I always go back to the one statement, just the one statement. There's a lot of things go back and forth, but this one statement, just listen carefully. If the Palestinians and the Arabs today drop their weapons, you know what we'll have in the Middle East? Peace. Today. Peace. Immediate. You know, if Israel drops their weapons, you know what we'll have? No Israel. Israel wants peace. Israel wants peace. And now, you know, one place we take you to in Israel is a place called Ammunition Hill. That was a great big battle in the war, in 67 war. Great big battle there. And on the wall, the soldiers have to learn and recite their pledge. The soldiers pledge for the safety and protection of the enemy. That's what Israel's soldiers do. Israel's soldiers, before they can go into a room, when they've gone and ground, they have to knock on the doors, waiting to be killed. Their own Israeli people, they're going to be killed because they warn the enemy. Jewish people in the world don't know this. Israel does want peace. They care for the innocents, the people that are suffering. They do. And so, but we don't get that. The whole issue, I'll summarize it. The whole issue, those of you who don't know, today goes back to 1876, I think it was. This issue today. There's a little village right outside of Jerusalem, a little village that Palestinians, Arabs live in. In 1876, the Jewish people purchased that land. People don't know it. They bought it from who? The Arab Turks, the Ottoman Empire. They bought it and purchased with extremely high prices. The Jewish people owned that area outside of Jerusalem. They bought it with a lot of money for it. And they owned it from 1876 to 1947. It was theirs. 1948. 1948, there was the War of Independence. And the Jewish people lost that land. And they lost that land for 19 years. In that 19 years, there were Palestinians there already. And they lived there. And they built homes there in the 19 years. In 1967, Israel recaptured it in the Six-Day War. They recaptured it. And you know what they did? They let them stay on the land. It was Israel's. They let them stay on the land. They've been there. They say, but now we own it, and now you must pay rent. And they said, no. And Israel said, okay, and let them stay there. And finally, the Supreme Court in Israel, and some of the decisions were made in 1983, They made it official. You must pay rent to your Jewish landlords. 1983, I think it was. And they said, no. And Israel said, okay. They let them stay there. Over 50 years, they let them stay there, not paying any rent or anything. Finally, just recently, the Supreme Court said to Israel landowners, you are allowed to charge them rent. And if they don't pay rent, you're allowed to evict them, like anywhere else in the world. That's what this is all about. Jewish people said, we want, after 50, 60 years living there for free, Jewish people do not kick people off the land. They care for peace. That's what they want. But it's their own nation. They're allowed to make decisions. But in America and throughout the world, we say to Israel, you can't make your own decisions. Okay.